Hi guys, it's Paul from Itris and welcome to episode 5 of The Corner. On today's episode we're going to be talking to my friend and colleague Rob Harvey. Rob has worked for Itris for more than 20 years and has worked with a number of customers on various different projects. So Rob, welcome to The Corner. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about software implementation and projects. So without further ado, we'll jump straight into it. So we work with a number of companies of all sizes, focusing on an average SME customer. What would you say is a typical timescale for a new project implementation?
Well, it's difficult to say really without knowing the full scope, but I'm guessing around about 6 months would be about the average. If they don't have data migration, if it's just a straightforward blank database, you generally turn those around within a couple of weeks once you go through processes, training, that kind of stuff. So large companies, as I say, who are having a full sort of business scope, you're looking at about 6 months.
Okay, cool. Obviously there's a number of things that can affect that. So historically we've come across people not being able to get their data, staff leaving. What's the most sort of common thing you feel like we come across as a barrier?
The most common thing really for a project would be their current providers. Are they in contracts? Do they have 6 months, a year left? Are they sort of trying to work through their processes? And obviously data migration as well is a very key aspect to that as well. What length they want to go to their data migration. Are they having everything? They just want a snapshot. Are we doing some cleansing? A number of key factors, but as I say, generally I find that for the bigger clients that I work with, it really depends on the crossover of contracts.
Yeah, okay, great. And you mentioned cleansing there, which is something we've discussed in previous episodes. So I think more and more now people are actually looking at the size of their data and sort of questioning, do they need that? So what you're saying is if they're cleansing the data, then that's obviously more work in terms of from a data migration point.
It is more work, but at the same time, when we're planning a full migration, let's say we've got a large database and we have to migrate it over, say, the course of a weekend or 3 or 4 days, that can actually bring it down and help with a go live date, so you have less downtime. So if we're cleansing data in the migration, we're actually cutting data that we're moving across. So as you come into your go live date, in actual fact, you can actually go live on a Monday morning rather than say on a Wednesday if we kick it off on a Friday.
Okay, great. So we mentioned in our implementation white paper the customer's A team. So that's generally made up of key stakeholders with different personality traits. Who would you ideally want from the customer's side in this team?
Well, first and foremost, someone with authority there as their project lead, who work closely with our project lead. They will have the overall authority to get things done at their end. Secondly, would be someone who would work like a project admin, who would then work day to day, doing the general tasks such as working out process, looking at data, working out what training schedules they need. And then from there you would have key users who would then check the data. Then from a technical side, it might be that they've got some in-house IT people or outsourced IT people. If they have their own servers, whoever it is that looks after those servers, we will work closely with them as well, so they would be included in the project team.
So with those different types of people, obviously there's going to be lots of different communication between different departments, our side and their side. So one thing you mentioned there is training is obviously a massive one, people checking the data as well as the technical points. In terms of communication, what's sort of easiest from your side or from our side as a business? Is that easier to be filtered through one point of contact their side, so whoever's leading the project, or is it sort of okay for them to have direct
everything should
access?
always be filtered through one person.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean you can't go off piece. As long as you're going through that project liaison, you can then go and find out more detail from, say, someone who's checking data or the IT technician. But everything has to be funneled through that one person.
Okay, great. So it doesn't necessarily matter the size of your A team, and quite often that will depend on obviously the size of the business we're working with. Might be 1 or 2 people for smaller businesses, but obviously some of the larger enterprise clients we work with could be 10, 15 people involved in that. So it doesn't necessarily matter how big. What you're saying is if they channel that through one point of contact to that project liaison, that's a lot better generally.
That's right. Everything has to go through a project liaison. Everything has to be captured. Everything has to be followed up with email conversations that you've had. Everything needs to be documented in the project plan, and it's easier to go through that one point of contact who will have the overall say on everything anyway. You might have 3 or 4 users who want something done in totally different ways. That project liaison will have to go through everything and make that final decision.
So they're basically collating that data and then making
Absolutely.
the informed decision to then communicate that with us.
Yeah.
Good stuff. So next question leads us into this question actually quite nicely. How much time over the project life cycle would you expect that project liaison or that single point of contact to dedicate to the project? So an hour a day, 3 days a week, full time?
It can vary. If in an ideal world, I'd like them to spend 7 days a week,
Like you do.
know, like I do, 24 hours a day. But it never comes down that route, and it also depends on what their timescales are as well. If they're working on a 12-month project for delivery, then the time that they'll spend on it will be less. As you come down and hit those milestones, more time will need to be applied to the project.
Nice. So what we're saying, and again, this will potentially relate to the size of the company, the size of the migration, but the longer the project, almost the more time you have and the more sort of relaxed that communication would be. Obviously, if their timescales are, we need to be live in the next 3 months, but we've got 200 users to roll out training and a new system to, expect that project liaison to be dedicating a little bit more time to communicating. So I know there's certain milestones you mentioned there you're hitting. So naturally there's going to be times where we're doing work and actually we're not asking for feedback or anything like that. But then I suppose they need to be ready for when we need them to sign off on stuff to be
exactly.
dedicated.
So within the project plan, we'll have things like a dry run migration. We will dedicate a time period for myself to do that, and a delivery time, and then in the project plan we assign the delegates who are part of the project team to come back, give us feedback by a certain point. How they deal with that, really, I mean, it should be straight away, but generally what we find is they leave it to the last minute. A lot of things aren't adhered to, and then that milestone, that we then have to put it back a week or 2 weeks because they haven't met their deadline. Yeah,
sure. So if they're missing sort of deadlines and targets, that's only going to have a ripple effect down the project and push things further back.
And those timelines are agreed by the project liaison on both sides before we sign it off, and then we obviously tackle the project.
Okay, so one of the benefits of Itris 9 is our multiple deployment methods, being cloud, on-premise, hybrid cloud. What are the main differences from a project key stakeholder's point of view?
Well, I suppose the first point of view is if you're going self-hosted, you've got your own infrastructure to think about. That will be managed by the client. They may already have something in place, so they need to check that it meets up to our standards outlined in our technical documentation.
And that would be either their internal IT consultant or third-party IT?
It would be their IT department that would deal with that. So it will come down from the project liaison to ensure that it's all signed off correctly internally. However, it wouldn't just end at that point, because if they've got a database, they may not necessarily know what size it is. We can only recommend based on numbers. You might find that a 100 user company has a 5 gig database. They kept it nice and clean. It really doesn't need that much processor or RAM on a server. But then you might have a 10 user who's got a 200 gig database, which totally sort of changes around the whole aspect of what you will require on your server. Okay,
and obviously if they are self-hosting, so if they're going for either an on-premise solution, which we defined in episode 4 as them either hosting the server in their office or at a third-party location. Obviously we offer hybrid cloud access. So what does that mean from an IT or a key stakeholder's point of view? What sort of additional things will they need as well as just the server and the database?
For hybrid cloud, they will need to purchase a domain or supply a subdomain with a SSL certificate that we can then install using IIS on their server, which will then link into our database and allow us to create that cloud connectivity.
Right, and the SSL certificate is like a security certificate, right?
That's right.
So people coming into that network, it's a secured
it's the same
connection.
thing that every website now pretty much has it. It's industry standard. So we will bind that to that site in IIS, which gives us that extra layer of security.
Okay, so thinking of third-party stakeholders such as IT, website or application suppliers, what sort of information is shared and how is that best communicated?
Well, we have a number of documentation pieces that we supply, such as our technical specification document, tells you about servers, tells you about client machines, that minimum specs that you need. We have API documentation that we share with clients, and sort of that will entail sort of web job posting, registrations, that kind of stuff. And also, you know, when it comes to IT people, I generally will have a conversation with them about everything that we offer. I go through the business critical functionality with the project liaison at the start and ask them to supply me absolutely everything that they do now, everything that they want to have in the future. And what with it being business critical, I will know what they need to go live with. And then I can build that into the project plan. And that generally will include things such as job posting, which may have been overlooked, which leads us into that conversation with their IT team or their web team, and at that point you can start bringing other people into that project team as well. There's also things such as text messaging as well. They might, I find lots of these clients, although they've spoken about it, actually implementing it for go live, they kind of forget about these things, so we have to get all of that down, put it into the project plan, and then we have to go and liaise with Firetext and so forth.
Okay, great. And love the plug of the partner there.
Yeah.
Cheers,
Anything
Firetext.
for you, mate.
So what I would say, what I've got from that is there's obviously clear documentation that we supply, but sometimes that can be two ways. So sometimes they're supplying us with stuff. So quite often, again, in the sales process, what we might cover, which we've talked about in previous episodes, is them putting like a wish list together. So like that business critical information. And sometimes the sales team here will provide your project management guys and team with that information at the point of handover. So what you're doing is obviously confirming that with the client, that that's still the case. Obviously that can change through the project life cycle, which is fine. But also those identifying partners and integrations that they might have. The API documentation is a key one for a lot of our customers. You know, a lot of people are asking for APIs so they can actually develop their own stuff, so they're not restricted to specific partners. How do we provide that API documentation? Is that sort of documents, or how does that work?
It's actually, we provide it in a sandbox environment. You can actually go and have a look at all the endpoints. It tells you what you need to do with them, and generally if you're speaking to your web team, they will understand it, they will know what they need to do with it, and if there's things missing, they will come back to the project team and basically communicate directly with us.
So
things added in.
So the project delivery consultant's on hand as well, so it's not just chuck them the information, get on with it. It's actually, if you've got any questions, come and talk to us, and we can help you through it, add stuff to it if needed, and do that. So Rob, we offer all of our customers a dry run. Now, assuming that's not a jog around the park in the peak of summer, can you tell us what this is and the benefits that it brings to the customer and its key stakeholders? So
dry run, basically, we'll get a copy of their data and other processes that we may well have put in place, like they need to get new machines in, that kind of thing. But ultimately, the biggest part of it is taking a copy of their data, migrating it into ITRIS 9 infrastructure, and providing them with a database as outlined in the project. Then we get them to check their data, not just their data, but also we do UAT sign-offs, user acceptance testing, performance testing, that kind of stuff, before we ultimately sign it off for us to then go on to that go live state.
Great. So I suppose dry run can be often referred to as maybe a test environment, or a sandbox environment. You know, those are the sort of terms that are used. But ultimately, what you're saying, it's used really as testing not just the system and them getting to learn the system, but also the data. And do they tend to make changes? You know, do they identify things that they want changed in the system from like a configuration point of view? And will that be carried across to their sort of go live sort of version of the system?
Well, I suppose the first thing to think about is we're replicating what their go live is going to be. So forget data, forget Itris. We're also doing everything else within their infrastructure that they're going to be changing. That needs to be done. We then migrate all the data, and effectively, when we go live, this is how it's going to be. We're testing to make sure everything's going to be working as it should. Like I said, performance, functionality. Have they got everything that's business critical to them? Then we look at the data, make sure that that's all come across correctly. Then we look at processes. Are the processes going to work for them? Do they need to, like you mentioned, change some of the config areas? Will that affect the data migration? Do we have to do data migration changes? If we do, we will then either do them on the fly, live in that dry run, or if they're too big to do in that dry run, we might do a second dry run, or we might add that into the go live migration, because it may all just be a small change that won't affect it too much.
Okay, so it sounds like it can be an ever-evolving sort of process when they're in dry run, depending on what's come up. What's the most dry runs you've ever seen a customer do?
I think I've had 5 or 6 before.
Okay.
That was from multiple CRMs all going into one.
Right, so multiple data sources.
Yes,
so.
Which does come about. You'll have four or five different data sources all coming into one, and as you can imagine, merging records, cleansing records, all that kind of stuff. It's a big project.
So when you say merging, that's like identifying duplicates in the system,
Yeah.
and then actually they want that data merged into the one
Absolutely, yeah.
record. So I suppose in theory, if they've got 5 databases, technically that's 5 separate data migrations.
That's right, yeah.
Right, and then you look at that and identify the duplicates and merge them together.
Yep.
So a lot more work.
Absolutely.
So again, when we were talking about sort of timescales before, although the average project might be 6 months, that's based off generally one data migration.
Off the one, yeah.
But sometimes we work with enterprise clients who may have bought businesses over the course of the year, or their years of business, and to create a group of businesses. And if they're rolling that out across all of them at the same time,
And it might be that you'll go live with, say, the first migration, and then the second rolls into the first one. So you then take a snapshot. That will be your data of the first migration you've done. That then copies into a test, where you then insert the next and the next.
Right,
and the next,
so you
and
might
so
have
forth.
multiple go-live dates.
Yeah, you'll have 5 or 6 different go-live dates, depending on how they work.
Okay, but they can then opt for one if they want to. You know,
Yes,
if they want to
of
say,
course.
actually, we want just this all to hit at one time.
Yeah.
So we've got 50 users on this system, 50 users on that, 50 users on that, times 5 systems.
Yeah.
We can either do 5, we might do 3, but actually they can do one if they want to.
Or it might be that they all use different types of functionality, and we need to build sort of bespoke functionality and that kind of thing, so that it will have to wait. There's so many different variants, and that's why it has to go through that project liaison at the start of the project, to really nail down those timelines.
So as long as those things are identified at the early stages, which we talked about before, then it's all plain sailing. That can be planned for.
Yes, exactly.
Have we ever been in a situation where a customer partway through the project has either acquired another business or another database, and has sort of said, actually, can we introduce this to the project?
Yeah, we get things like that all the time. Or it may not be another business. It might just be that they've got a spreadsheet of clients
that someone's just found in a top drawer all of a sudden. We've
and
got
all of a
these
sudden
1,000 candidate CVs in here.
Or they've got
We also
consultants who are working off spreadsheets, and they just
Yeah.
hand them in, and like, can we get all of that added in? And yes, of course, and it does change the timeline.
So that's quite a common thing that comes out in the sales process as well, is actually, you know, once they start questioning how people are using their current system to compare it to how they're going to use their new system, they often find that, oh, actually, we've just found out this consultant's got this spreadsheet that they just use on their local machine, and he's got a folder full of attachments, which is a GDPR nightmare if it's just, you know, in an unsecured location on their desktop. But actually, sometimes we will identify that in the sales process to hand over to you guys, but that still does happen after.
It does. Everything still happens before and after. And again, you know, it's just something that you will analyse, add to the project plan, which then filters down all the dependencies. So.
Yeah, fair. At what points do training from our side get involved in the project? Does that tend to be straight away, early stages, or?
Generally, for me, I will have the project kick off, and then after that point, I introduce them to our training team. They will work together with the project liaison to go through the training aspect, and then we just work closely throughout the project. They'll schedule in, sort of 1 or 2 hours sort of sessions with them to go through how the system works, how they set up the system, which then helps out with things like processes that they might want to change around. So, which could then affect the data migration, for example. It might lead into us doing changes on there. So we always try and get them involved as early as possible, and then obviously with our video material now, that kind of helps out. But those 1 or 2 hours slots that they have with training really do help out.
So you talk about video material there, you're obviously referring to, currently we've got both a knowledge base, and we're just implementing a learning management system as well. So I suppose all of those elements, as much as they come under training, obviously they're very important to the success of the project and the user adoption of the system. And I suppose that's where it's important for the A team to include, perhaps a training consultant their side, or any sort of learning and development, manager or whatever it is from their side.
Absolutely.
Okay, great. So previously you mentioned UAT, or user acceptance testing. Whose responsibility is it for that user buy-in? Is that us? Is it the client? Is it the key stakeholders?
We can push it as much as possible, but ultimately it's the project liaison.
And obviously there's a number of things, as we mentioned, from from a training point of view, from a user adoption point of view, if they're using the dry run, if they're gaining access to that early doors at the beginning of the project. I assume that just makes it easier down the line for user acceptance, rather than we're going live with this system, here it is, you've got to use this tomorrow.
And that's why you'll have potentially team leaders who will be that core structure of A, checking the data, B, looking at functionality, and C, looking at user acceptance testing.
So that might be like department heads, for example. So
how
actually
can
the head of perm
deal with this?
They're going to make sure all of their perm consultants have got early access and view.
Of course.
And if it's temp, obviously we want to make sure the temp access has got. So yeah, the earlier on they have access to that information, the better it is. So Rob, leading on from the previous question, obviously with training and the project plan and everything now in place and going forward, obviously you're working towards what's referred to in the industry as a go live date. I suppose, some people won't necessarily understand what a go live date is, as much as, it's common terminology for us. We've been in the industry a long time, but what can people expect from a go live date? What is that? What does that mean? What does it look like in terms of switching from one system to another?
Effectively, you're just cutting off anything that you were using previously, and that might be an old system, or it might be that you're working from spreadsheets if you're a smaller company, or you're linking your CRM into your website that registers all the jobs that you're putting on, any applicants that are being registered. We're cutting all of that off. You're basically stopping everything, and you're moving on to the implementation of ITRIS. And all those milestones, all the steps in the project that we've followed, that we've put that nice little tick next to, say that's been completed, signed off, and that is your go live date.
Okay, great. And that doesn't necessarily mean job done, does it? We find a lot sometimes on go live date. We see perhaps sometimes you're on site. We might have training consultants on site doing floor walking as well.
It will depend on the client. Sometimes they like to have sort of training a couple of weeks after going live, just to do that refresher training.
Got you.
They'll have Q&A sessions once they start using the system a bit more. Obviously we've got the support team there who will be introduced at the go live date for any technical issues, but effectively that project plan may well carry on, because we might then have things such as third-party integrations that are working with their API that we've set to go live, say, another month after they've gone live with the actual ITRIS system.
Great. So that go live date doesn't necessarily mean that's everything.
No.
You might say that's what we're working towards, and then after we'll tackle these other parts of the project. Great. So it's not like you can just switch off once go live date's gone.
No, absolutely not.
Your project delivery guys can't just switch off and on.
We never switch off.
No.
24/7 we're on.
Great. So, Rob, How stressful is a go live day?
Well, I've got one going on today, Paul, if I'm honest.
Sorry.
So, it's just like this. No, it can be stressful, but with the right planning, the right project, it can also be very easy.
And you've had 20 years experience here at Itris, and the majority of that has been sort of on the ground, project delivering, project managing. Obviously, you're senior now in the business, so you've got a team of project delivery consultants below you. How do you sort of manage their stress, and how do they manage the customer stress? Because all roads lead to you as their line manager. If they're stressed, how do you manage that?
Well, effectively, we try and take all the stress out, obviously, by doing the projects, doing the dry runs, replicating everything beforehand, so that when we do hit that button for the go live, everything should already have been catered for. Go live is more of a case of helping out users where they may not necessarily remember how to do something.
Sure.
It'd
be stressful for the user,
Yes.
Oh God, knowing I've used this system for 10, 15 years of my career, and that's all I know. And actually, I know I'm going to have to come in Monday. It'd be interesting to see how many people pull sick days. Actually, maybe we should do a survey with some of our bigger customers. How many people turn up on the day of go live? That'd be interesting. And I know often that's where our training consultants might be on site, just to ease that stress for the customer as well.
The PM team, we're always available to talk through any issues. We've got our support team there who actually do help out with sort of training queries as well. So they've got access, as soon as they go live, in fact, they've got access to a much bigger team of people, which, rather than, say, myself speaking to a project liaison, and then filtering it down, it becomes a lot clearer, a lot easier.
Yeah, because the project team this end will generally be a couple of project delivery consultants, a couple of training consultants, developer if bespoke work's required, perhaps one of our API experts if there's other stuff going on with another partner. As what you're saying is once they've gone live, actually what we do to ease that stress is we open up to other departments who then have all that information.
Who have got a lot of experience, I might add as well. I get asked support questions some of the times, and yes, I deal with support, but when you're working day in, day out on it, pretty much straight away if there's an issue, what the answer is, and you fix it straight away.
And I think we're pretty lucky in terms of our experience and the size of our business. Specifically compared to some of our competitors, what we've got here, I suppose that makes us stand out is people with experience. Yourself, 20 years. That's a huge number. Myself, 11. But I know some of the support guys, they've been supporting customers for 11, 12 years.
Long time.
Some of them.
It
is a long time. So I suppose that all helps ease the stress, knowing that the experts are there to...
And we've all been through it before as well, the support guys and even yourself, Paul. I know you've been involved with a few of these sort of go live things as well, having that experience to settle down the client as well.
It's that whole, we'll do future episodes on change management, because that's a whole different beast, but it is change management. Ultimately, it's managing that change to reduce stress and make that as easy as possible with, project management is obviously such a key part to that. That's why we've done this episode. So Rob, last question, you'll be pleased to know this one's been sent in by Recruitment Wizard 86. What's the worst thing that's happened to you in project stage? I can see that 20 years. Okay.
There's a lot of things to sort of think about, but I imagine, generally I've been very lucky. However, I suppose the worst issue is you're running through a project. It might have gone on 6 months, 8 months. Some of these bigger clients, they'll have contractors in, that kind of thing, who are working on the project. All of a sudden, something's happened at their end. I come in on a Monday morning, and I get a phone call, such and such, no longer with the business, and their team are gone.
So the project liaison just
gone. We've got 2 weeks to go till the plan go live. Everything was going swimmingly up until that point. They might have bespoke work that we've done as well. So effectively, you're putting that project on hold. You've got to go in to the business. You've got to really kind of just help them get back to the stage that they were, identify someone who can then become that project liaison, run through every single aspect of that project.
And I suppose that has a massive impact, doesn't it? Especially if users have got to the point where they're happy and they've got a date in mind that they're all working towards. I suppose that just puts...
Yeah, and you've got things like payroll integrations, which you're ready to flip over.
Right.
Websites ready to flip over. All of that has to be managed. And generally you have to get involved with all of that and then try and reset the date, and that can be quite stressful.
And generally when payroll and back office is involved as either key stakeholders or key parts of data, that is often, from our experience, but particularly in sales and account management and customer success, is that they're generally working to a specific date that is based on the beginning or end of their financial year. So typically we might see a lot of people aim for the beginning of April as their go live date, particularly if they're switching that over.
And you'll run, generally what you would do is you'll run two payrolls side by side and replicate them just to see if there's any issues that might arise, and just to give the client that little bit of confidence.
So that would be involved in the dry run process as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but what you're saying is you're hoping at the beginning of March you don't get a phone call to say John Smith's no longer with the business, or John Smith's been hit by a bus.
Well, not only John Smith, but also 5 of his crew that are also in the project
with
team.
Him.
Yeah.
Right. So they've all gone.
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting.
Which
I hope that doesn't. I hope it doesn't happen too often.
No.
But I'm glad we've got experience in managing it. And again, I suppose it's important for us then to just step up a little bit, for the customer's behalf, and go in all guns blazing with a team of people to try and help them resolve, help them identify.
And that's the key part of knowing every aspect of the project and asking those questions straight up front. Effectively, you got a new person in, we start again. What's your critical business functionality? What is key to your business? And then just running through it again. So stress-wise for us, it's not too bad, but for the client, it really can be.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Thanks for sharing that.
No problem.
Okay, so that's been episode 5 of The Corner. Thank you to Rob Harvey for joining us today. I know you're a busy man.
Thanks, Paul. It's been a pleasure.
Obviously, if you guys have got any questions relating to project life cycle, data, implementation, training, anything like that, pop them in the comments below and we'll be sure to come back to you. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss episode 6, and we'll see you next time.